But if you, I'll start. If we could just do some quick introductions before we get started. So for those of you that I don't know, I am Sarah Sharp and I am the ag agent in Greene County. And I am going to be talking tonight about how to getting your product to your consumer. So just a little fun fact. So I'm letting people in. So I kind of like to talk about this. So why I talk about this and why I enjoy this conversation. So my family has a pork business, and so we've been doing direct marketing to customers since I was 8 years old. I tell people that I grew up going to the farmer's market. And then I had a chicken business and sold eggs at the farmer's market until I went to college. Then I graduated from college and had no job, or no paying job, as I say. And I actually ended up starting a U-Pick pumpkin patch on my family's farm. So I have done a little bit of everything, and I really enjoy this conversation because I really like talking about the pros and cons of all of the different ways to get your product to the consumers. Because a farmer's market is great, but it certainly has its downsides too. So that being said, if you all would just kind of go around and just a quick introduction of yourself and what you're hoping to maybe get out of this presentation tonight. If you want, I can just call names and that might be easiest. So I will start just kind of how I see on my screen. So there is an 804 phone number calling in if you want to go first.
Yeah, this is Scott O'Connell in Louisa County. Just looking to sort of understand the direct marketing aspect. I just bought a farm last May, trying to sell beef direct to consumers. So just looking to get some pointers on that. Thank you.
Perfect. Eric?
Yeah, I'm Eric Henschel. I'm in Albemarle County, and we run a small pork business. We do just 5 or 6 whole and a half a year, maybe 8 this year, and I was looking at any other outlets, and hopefully we can expand in the future.
All righty, Katie?
I'm a sophomore in high school, and I'm trying to get into doing pigs, and I want to be able to do farmers markets, but I'm not sure how it's going to work.
Perfect. That sounds great. Lena?
Hi, we're in Albemarle County starting a small, mostly vegetable farm, and we're also thinking about farmers markets and how that would work, and maybe potentially CSA or something like that down the road too.
Perfect. And last but not least, Sherry.
Hi, so I have a lavender farm in Flavanna County, and we're fairly new and pretty small, but we also have some other products that we sell. So we're sort of on this cusp between, do we do a farmer's market? Do we have U-Pick events on the farm? Do we do craft shows or festivals? And of course, since we just really started last year, when we couldn't do much, we just did stuff online. So just really looking to see what options are out there as COVID leaves us and we can sort of have a normal farm and sales again.
Perfect. Wonderful. This is so exciting. I love talking about all of this. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And just so you all know, I've given this presentation a couple times, and this presentation is one that is best done with lots of input from people. And so I like to make this more of a conversation than me just talking to you. Can everybody who is on Zoom see my screen okay?
Yep, all good.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
All righty. So just some things to think about as we get started with your product. So first, think about what that product is and really be specific. So if you are, whether that be a half an animal, whether that be tomatoes, peppers, etc., be very specific with what and listing out those products that you want to sell is. And then I want you to think about the price of it, because the price that you charge may end up starting somewhat determining where it is that you are going to be selling. Think about how you're going to advertise. So the place and the promotion, those two kind of go pretty similarly together. Who are you going to sell it to? So this is one where you want to think about what your who that target market is. Are you targeting the Charlottesville crowd? Are you targeting the suburban rural mom who lives out at Lake Monticello? Are you, thinking about the Harrisonburg crowd? Where is it that you're thinking about targeting? And when you think about that, think about what those people are very interested in. And think about what their priorities are going to be. How are you going to sell these products? So think about your product form. Are you going to have it frozen? Is it going to be fresh? How often are you going to have to harvest? And then that, and that also goes into, as we talk about it, the place of where we'll be selling it. How involved do you want to be? So is this new enterprise of yours, is this going to be a full-time job for you? Is this a weekend job? Is this an evening after your full-time job? What sort of involvement, what level do you want to be at? And what is your time and commitment ability like? So do you have a whole family who's able to help you with this? Do you have a very demanding full-time job where you may only have half an hour after work? What are your weekends like? Do you have kids that are going to be in sports that, you may not be able to be at a farmer's market every Saturday morning? So these are all things to really sit down and really think through before we even start looking at, some of these places where you may be able to sell. And if you all have, I cannot see the chat box. So if you have any sort of questions or want to speak, anything you want to say, feel free, because it won't let me bring it up. So direct to consumer. So thinking about farmers markets. So in your eyes, what would be some of the pros and the cons of farmers markets? Anybody?
I can see a con.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
very time consuming.
Yes.
Seems like you have built-in customers.
Yes.
People can actually see your products in front of them and, assess them.
Absolutely.
Rather than trying to see them online or something else.
They can feel it with their hands, and that it makes a huge difference.
You can build relationships with other farmers and consumers.
And that is the whole know your farmer, know your food movement. Anybody else have anything that's just burning at them they want to get out? If not, I can go. So some of the pros for farmers market. Number one, you are going directly to the consumer, so you can charge a premium for this. That being said, again, you have to think about where it is that this farmers market is in the clientele or the customer that's going to be coming to that farmers market. So the clientele that may be going to the Madison County Farmers Market on a Saturday morning is probably going to be a little different than the clientele that's going to the south of the James Farmers Market in Richmond or just outside Richmond on a Saturday morning. I tell people that farmers markets, you have to like people if you want to go sell at farmers markets. And I say this laughing because you think that would be somewhat straightforward, but I've been at farmers markets. I remember there was a guy who used to set up diagonally across from us at one of the farmers markets, and he would have was trying to sell meat, and he would sit in a chair with a newspaper and his feet propped up for the majority of the farmer's market. And then he would come complain to my dad about how he had no sales. Well, you know, he was not willing to talk to people. He was not very friendly and open. I mean, you have to like people if you want to sell at a farmer's market. It's great if you have large or small quantities of something. Basically, once it's gone, it's gone. You can run specials if you have ground beef that you're trying to get rid of, or if you have an oversupply of tomatoes where your tomatoes just went crazy that week. You can put a special on it and then it's gone. At the same time, you can really market it and use that aspect of having very limited quantities to create that sort of, not panic, but a rush for people to come to you to make sure that, you know, they want to get that last 2, you know, heads of cauliflower that you may have. You have that flexibility of product offerings where it can change, and that, you know, with farmers markets, people can somewhat understand that seasonality and how things can change throughout the year. And you can use that as a way to kind of get new products in front of people so that then they can try it. You can get that direct feedback and you can educate the public. You know, I was on Instagram yesterday and there's a whole post about someone she does like a funny reel, but she makes fun of bloggers. And so she did a whole video yesterday about how, you know, there was a fake phone call about how somebody was doing somebody did a recipe on dairy and said that there were eggs in there, and that these people, she was complaining because eggs are dairy. And there was many more than should have been, comments about people have no idea that eggs aren't a dairy product. So farmers markets are great for that because it does help you educate some of those consumers. Thinking about the cons of it, that time commitment involved. You know, I tell people that I did not grow up playing Little League sports because I was too busy at the farmers markets every single Saturday morning. And you think about that time, you know, you have the farmers market, but then you also have all of the prep that comes from the farmers market too. So that's getting everything ready, getting produce washed, getting everything in the cooler, loading coolers the morning of, you know, if you need to keep everything cold. You know, you are higher than the grocery store most of the time. And depending on the clientele that comes to the farmer's market, sometimes they understand that, but sometimes they don't. And they think that they can go to the farmer's market and get the exact same thing for the same price. Obviously, we know that's not the case. We've kind of already talked about how you must like people, but also that people can get upset if you run out of products, or if you don't have the product. So if it's July 4th and you're selling steaks or watermelon and sweet corn, you know, if you are a produce grower and people come to the farmers markets in July, they want tomatoes, they want sweet corn, and they want watermelons. So if you don't have those and you're a produce grower, you know, people can certainly get upset with that. Alrighty, so direct to consumer, the farm stand or a store. Does anybody have anything they can think of, both pros or cons, to having an on-farm stand or on-farm store?
You don't have to load everything up every week to take it somewhere.
So true.
For us, it would require some infrastructure investment.
Yeah.
It better be a great, convenient location.
Yes and no. There's ways you can get around that.
I understand.
Extra insurance requirements.
Yes. So some pros, and you know, yes, sometimes there is less cost, and that depends on the infrastructure that you already have on the farm. You know, if you have a barn that's already there that you can kind of fix up pretty easily, you know, we'll see. But when you look at the mileage, the gas, the time, depending on how often your store is open, you know, that can be a pro or it can be a con. You can have people on the farm. So for me, starting a pumpkin patch, having people on the farm, really letting them see how things are grown on the farm, having them actually out on a farm, that was a huge pro for me. You can set the hours, and I say that you can set the hours, but people don't necessarily abide by those hours. You can decide that you only want to be open on Fridays and Saturdays, and inevitably someone will show up on a Tuesday morning expecting you to be open and not wondering why you aren't. But I mean, you have that flexibility that you can make it work with your schedule, and you can be open all year long. So where farmers markets really, their golden time is about May through the end of September, you have markets that are open. Other than that, you can have a farm stand where you have an outlet for your products all throughout the year. So some of those cons, you have people who don't adhere to those hours. You have to think through the regulations and the zoning, making sure that your county is okay with that. I've seen someone who decided to go with the beg forgiveness, don't ask permission sort of thing that did not turn out so well for him. So my suggestion, if you are thinking about doing this, is really make sure you go in with your county and have a very open and frank conversation about what you are willing and want to do. And most of the time, counties will be much, much friendlier towards you if you do that. Not on here, which is a good point, Scott, but thinking about the farm stand and store being in a good location. And I say yes and no, because it depends on how you market it. You don't want to be in the middle of nowhere, which is definitely a con, but at the same time, if you market it as, and especially if you have some different attractions or some things to do there to give people a reason, to give them more of a destination sort of event, whether that be a drive to the country, whether that be, get out of the city for the day, you don't want to be in the middle of nowhere, but you can also market it a different way as well. So that's just another way to think about that too. Another con is that you may have to have employees. And so that sets on a whole new level of complications when it comes to this, dealing with employees. And then of course, if you have to build a new building, putting the investment in that, you have to decide if that's worth it or not. So a CSA, community supported agriculture, pros and cons here.
It can help with upfront cash flow.
Yes.
You have to build your own network of people.
Yes.
The challenge is if there's a poor growing season.
Absolutely. So some pros that we can talk with, the buyer pays up front. So yes, you have money at the beginning of the season to work with, which is a huge pro, because when you think about it, the beginning of the season is when, especially if you're a produce grower or really any grower, that's normally when you're going to have, your highest cost is right there, buying all your seeds, getting your fertilizer, getting everything ready to go. So having that cash in the beginning can be a huge, huge help. At the same time, you have to make sure that you are a good steward of that money, because that may be the only money. If you're doing a CSA, that could be the only money that you are getting all year long. So you want to make sure that you don't spend all your money in March and then you don't have any money to pay the bills in October. So making sure, if you're doing that you have somebody who can really balance the books well, and make sure that they are a good steward of it. You can be flexible in the offerings of your products. So the great thing about a CSA is that you can make it what you want it to be. You can grow things that you enjoy. That being said, you still, your customers are going to come in with some sort of expectation of what they're going to want from you. So there has to be pretty good communication. You have to be pretty good at explaining and making sure that those customers know what they're going to get from you, or making sure that you understand what that customer is looking looking for from you. And, you also know that there is a set amount of product that leaves your farm every week or every 2 weeks, however often that you are deciding that you want to do that CSA. You could break it up. You could have one group of people pick up on Tuesdays and another group of people pick up on Fridays, so that then you can really spread out what your harvest, and so that you're not having everything go out at one point in the week. Some cons of a CSA: making sure that you have enough to fill a box. That kind of goes back to what happens if you have a really poor growing year, because yes, technically, a CSA means that those people are buying in with the understanding that there could be a risk and that there could be a poor growing season. But let me tell you what's going to happen if somebody pays $600 for a share for a summer, and then you say, oh, sorry, it didn't rain, we don't have any produce. In theory, yes, that's how it works. In real life, you're going to have some really, really mad customers that they did not get what they paid for. You also want to make sure that you are building interest, but you're not overselling yourself. So, I think that I remember it was sort of a CSA, but it was one of these box programs. And basically they got too big too fast. They were selling on Groupon. I mean, they were getting all sorts of interest in their business, but they couldn't make it last because they had oversold themselves. They couldn't deliver good customer service. They couldn't deliver enough product. So if I say that if you want to start a CSA, you're better off to start small with just a few people and then build gradually, because the worst thing you could do is have 50 people on a 1 acre produce farm and not, and you've oversold yourself, and then you have a whole lot of unhappy customers, and you've really stressed yourself out as well. So then we think about mail order and internet, and this is a very interesting one, because with COVID, I've seen this rise exponentially, the amount of this that's happening. So pros and cons that you all could see here.
You have everything set up as you need it. You can fill orders as they come, and they pay up front per order.
Yep.
And you don't have to go anywhere.
Potential shipping issues. Something doesn't get there or gets there late.
Absolutely. Hello, USPS, who's taking 3 weeks to get one thing, I have a Shutterfly order that's sitting in North Carolina that's been there for 2 weeks. I don't know what they're doing there.
Trying to figure out where it goes.
Right. You think a bright orange package would stick out.
You also have to really find your audience, and that's not always easy.
Yeah.
You can't get in front of people.
Right. Well, and I think 2020 was a funny year for this, because you had the meat shortage and you had people who were Googling buying beef from the farm. And so I wonder if people who had this great success with internet sales and mail order sales in 2020, if that will continue in 2021, because I have real doubts. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I have real doubts that it will last, the online. But I mean, I could be wrong, who knows? But there are some pros to this, is that it is a good way to get your product to a large area. So if you are somebody who's starting a farm, but you have friends all over the United States that want to support you, and they have friends and they'd be willing to share your name and your business, this is a great way to get that product all over the United States. You can advertise in a larger area. So if you are in a very rural area of Virginia, where you just don't have the farmers markets, you don't have a consumer base to do a CSA or anything, you have that. Now, if you're growing produce, I think that this is a little harder, because we know you just can't ship fresh goods. It's just very logistically, it would be very, very difficult. The cons to this is that it does take a very long time to grow. Just going on Google and advertising, you got to hit the right person at the right time who would be willing to do that. Thinking about shipping in the summer. Shipping in the summer is hard if you have any sort of perishable product, because by the time you pay for overnight or next day shipping, that gets very, very expensive. And in today's age of Amazon, where it's free, 2-day shipping, people just are not accustomed to paying a whole lot for shipping costs. And it can be very expensive to maintain because you never know when that online order is going to come. So what if you have somebody who orders $150 worth of product, you have to have the storage to be able to keep it. If I am breaking up, hopefully I won't go too bad. And it's also, you have to have a website, and your website has to be pretty good to be able to keep all of that. All right, so then let's think about selling wholesale. Any pros and cons of wholesale sales?
You need a lot of something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lower revenue.
Yes.
Need to find a wholesale market.
Right.
It can be a good way to have more sales and volume because typically people buy in larger quantities.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to go find those customers. Someone else is finding them for you.
Right. So thinking about this, some of the pros of this, it is if you have a large amount of volume at one time. So if you are growing peppers and you grow a whole acre of peppers, you probably want to have some sort of wholesale buyer for you, because you're going to have a whole lot to get rid of, possibly at one time. It's great if you aren't a people person. If you don't want to go sit at a farmer's market and put a smile on your face for 6 hours a day and talk to people nonstop, a wholesale, you just have 1 or 2 buyers that you send it to. And thinking about it, it's often pre-ordered either by the week, by the month, by the year, depending on what it is, depending on who's buying it. They may have enough foresight that they can order from you well in advance, and that can help you in your planning. Some of the cons is that often wholesale accounts do not pay promptly. Sometimes you're looking at a net 15, net 30, net 60, and that could be on a good day. It could be net 30 and it still takes them 6 months to pay you. You just, being the little guy on the totem pole, sometimes it's hard to know when you will get paid for your products. Often we like to think that sometimes they do a good job of planning ahead, but they do wait to order at the very last minute. And so sometimes, they want 10 rib roasts and you have 2, and they're like, you go to deliver and they want to know, why they ordered yesterday. Why can't they have it? Because they're very used to dealing with Cisco, where they call the day before and they get whatever they want delivered to them the next day. Another thing that's very important, that you cannot charge retail price to these wholesalers. And as I have been doing this and, listened to lots of different interviews of wholesale buyers, I think they get very frustrated with small producers because the smaller producers want to charge them the retail price and don't understand why they will not pay it. And so, making sure that you're going into this with your eyes wide open, that the wholesale market is a very different market, and making sure that you understand that and know that you aren't going to get retail price. So what are you switching off, and what's your trade-off for that lower price that makes it okay, or worthwhile for you to sell to that wholesale market? All right. So, thinking about some of those wholesale sales to a retailer or distributor, make sure you know or have some idea of what you're getting into. And unfortunately, if you're a brand new grower just getting into this, sometimes you don't know until it's too late. But making sure that you have really good communication with that buyer, making sure that each of you are on the same page, meeting with them, talking with them, making your expectations clear, but then making sure that they make their expectations of you clear. Have a really good, clear availability sheet of what you have to sell. So this could be, not just the type of products, but maybe how often you'll have it, as well as the price becomes very important. Making sure that you know what your break-even price is when you go into this, making sure that you have prices set so that you can cover your costs. Making sure that you're representing yourself and your farm well. You don't want to go from feeding the animals or pulling weeds straight to going to meeting with a buyer. Make sure that you know how much you are capable of producing. Just like a CSA, you don't want to oversell yourself. You don't want to not be able to meet their deliveries. And make sure that you are keeping in touch with the buyer. As soon as you know, if you can't fill an order, make sure that you're getting in touch with them and letting them know that. So they either have time to, change their menu, or they have time to find another supplier if they need to. And I think importantly, often a mix of these selling channels is best. I work with local food hub a lot, and they will tell you that now it's 4P Foods, but when it was still local food hub, they would tell you that they did not want to see that they were your only buyer. They wanted to make sure that you had a couple different channels so that you weren't just solely relying on one. If you only relied on farmers markets, what would have happened in 2020 if all the farmers markets had closed down, which they did for a little bit, and you couldn't have switched to an online ordering platform? Or if you were only selling to restaurants, goodness, last year the restaurants did close down for a long period of time, and they're still not back up at full capacity. So, make sure you don't have all your eggs in one basket, spread them out. It's a good way to get, different streams of income as well. So, and then thinking about just some basic marketing of your product. So how are you going to set yourself apart? What is different about your story? When you go to the farmer's market, why are you different than all the other, 6 produce vendors or 3 other meat vendors that are there? Again, thinking about who your target audience is. How are you going to reach out to them? As a business owner, I have relied on Facebook advertising a whole lot. And it's a little scary when you think about some of the regulations that are coming through, when you think about the people who are not on social media these days for political reasons. As a business owner, I rely on that to get my business out there in front of people. So making sure that, any marketing tactics that you're using, you're getting to that consumer that you want to be at. And who is your competition? This goes back to that. How are you going to set yourself apart? What makes you different from all those other people? And this is one where I think it's very important that you don't talk negatively about your competition. You don't want to say why your competition is bad. You want to talk about why you are good, if that makes sense. That's very important. It makes you look better. You don't want to go out and just consistently, talk negatively about other businesses, but you want to do a good job of explaining your story and why people should buy from you. All right, so then thinking too, so your seasonality. So how are you going to sell in the off season? Whether that be you schedule kill dates for, only when you have sales. But how are you going to, if you do have products all year long, which is a good thing, you want to make sure that you have a way to get rid of those products. Also think about insurance. I tell people that if you can't afford insurance, you cannot afford to be in business. You can look at a lot of these local insurance companies, and they do have really great policies now. This is much more common. You are able to find this pretty easily. And so I really encourage people to make sure that you have insurance to cover your business. And if you have a specialty product, why is your specialty product better? What makes it better than some of the other ones out there? And how can you get that into to the consumer? All right, so that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing. Questions, comments, conversation. After looking at this, what are some thoughts that you all have? Is there anything that I didn't cover that you all want to talk about?
I guess, Sarah, I had one question about just regulations. I know there's a lot of, is there a central location to sort of find, like I know if you cook pies in your house, there's sort of rules about that. So is there somewhere you can sort of find that? Is that VDAX or how do I?
That's an excellent
Yeah,
question, Scott. Because it is horrible to
not a
find it.
track.
The VDAX website is as unfriendly as they come. And the document that you want is like 100-page document. So if you send me an email, or I can send it out to everybody afterwards, there is a VDAX guide for like home kitchens. I forget what the full name of it is, but it's like for small processors, home kitchens, etc. Your best, but it's not friendly to read. Your best bet is to kind of think up exactly what it is that you're thinking about producing, and then actually calling VDAX is normally what I tell people to do. I can send everybody the link to this very, very long document. But I am not being a regulator. They are normally the best ones to talk to, because a lot of times when you start thinking about pies, most baked goods you can do under the exemption. And there's a going to market publication, if you've never seen that I will include as well. But the going to market publication is really good. That's very basic. But then once you get to the next step of the cottage laws is what they're called, is where it starts to get a little more complicated, because in some of those you have to have a commercial kitchen, and that gets to be a disaster quickly.
So along those lines, so I have a lavender farm, but we also have honeybees and Christmas trees and a couple other things. And we're hoping to get some honey this summer. And I've looked into some of the cottage laws, and there are specifics about honey, but in some cases, like if I want to sell out of state, or wholesale, I have to have a commercial kitchen. How does one go about like finding one to rent? I don't plan on building one on my property, but I just like need one for a day. So do you have any tips or suggestions on how you even start with that?
So it's actually kind of sad, but there was the FCS agent in Albemarle. He actually started a business to start looking at this, and wanted to kind of do like a matchmaking, like a rental. He actually went and had talking to a lot of churches. Some local churches have commercial kitchens. In Fluvanna, you can actually, the Fluvanna Extension Office, they have a commercial kitchen there. That was part of the grant that John got before he left. But that was part of the deal with them moving to their new office, is that they have a complete commercial kitchen there as well that I believe you can rent out.
That's really handy to know. Thank you.
Yes.
Another question I have is, you know, I haven't done farmers markets yet, and one of the reasons is because like you have to commit to a whole summer, or like for a long-term spot, or at least that's what I hear. So are there other types of things that are kind of like farmers market, but you can just do like one-time events? I mean, and again, I guess my question is, how do you find those sorts of things and find the people that are putting them on?
Yeah, so shop around farmers markets. So some markets you do have to commit for the whole season, but some markets allow you to come in weekly. Now, sometimes those markets are more expensive, and they will kind of, if you go to that market multiple times, but not on a regular basis, you may be at a different spot each time.
Okay.
But you want to, like, if you like, Albemarle has a ridiculous number of farmers markets. So if you wanted to go to Albemarle, you could shop around and see which one would let you come, just for a few times.
Okay.
Because there's some, like the one in Charlotte, the Charlottesville City Market is run by Parks and Rec, but then there are a bunch of privately owned ones, private farmers markets as well. For example, I believe the one at Stonefield is a private market, and the one at Hollymead is a private market. And so those private markets, this sounds terrible. The private markets being privately owned by individuals doing them, all they care about is making money. So those are ones that may be more likely to allow you to come in just for 1 or 2 or 3 markets throughout the season whenever you want.
Okay.
Bring the questions on. I can talk about this stuff all day long. Love it.
This is Isaac. I have a question about setting prices.
Yeah.
I've been struggling to develop a budget. We haven't
Yep.
had a complete growing season where we've had all of our costs and tried to actually sell things. So do I just try to follow the prices that other people are selling things for?
So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have a good handle on what all of your costs are, which is hard when you haven't had a complete growing season.
Yeah.
So you can look up enterprise budgets. I'm going to make a whole list of everything I need to send out for myself. But enterprise budgets will be your best friend. So NC State has a wonderful, wonderful set of enterprise budgets for small growers. That will help you determine a lot, at least give you some sort of idea of expenses of what you can expect. And then you can kind of do some guesstimation of, what you may get out of it. And it's going to be really hard with not going through a whole growing season. And I know that. But you just kind of have to do the best you can. But number one is making sure you know sort of what your expenses are and how much you have to make to cover those expenses. And then sort of going off a guesstimate of how much you think that you are getting.
Okay.
And going through and do a lot of research. Go to different farmers markets, see what people are charging. There's actually, and I will send this out too for anybody who's interested, but I actually just discovered this, but VDAX puts out a farmers market price list. I had no idea, but they basically, what it is they get a bunch of farmers market managers from across the state to send in their average prices from vendors at those farmers markets. So you can get a pretty good average of what's being charged, what people are charging for different things. And they do both produce and meat across the state.
That's really cool. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I just discovered it. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago.
I think USDA does something like that. I know for pastured pork, they kind of have prices across the country with the high and low and the median.
Yeah. I haven't seen that, but I'm sure. I know that they do, the USDA does, and VDAX does some live marketing reports. And there may be some on the, package stuff as well. Any other comments, questions, anything? Thoughts?
As far as like selling meat, if you're not like GMO free or organic, is that going to put you down enough that you need to be able to do that to be able to sell?
No, it's all about marketing. So it's all about building those relationships with your customers. And being a high school student who wants to come out and start a business and do this, you can really take that aspect and you can market that, and people will want to support somebody, who's an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur. And so that's what makes you different. So that's what makes you special and unique. And so you take what makes yourself special and unique and different from everybody else, and then you take that and you run with it. No, I personally don't believe that being organic, now in the city of Charlottesville could be different, but outside of the city of Charlottesville, people are much more interested in knowing their farmer and knowing where their food comes from than buying certified organic. There's actually, just talking about that, there's actually been some studies that on the East Coast, except for some of the very metropolitan areas, being certified organic does not pay. Now in California, that's very different, where people will go hungry rather than buy things that aren't organic. But on the East Coast, I don't think we have that here. I think, you take what makes you different and you run with it, and that's how you sell yourself.
If I may, I have to echo that. It's like, we don't do anything. We only do, about 6 or 8 pigs a year, and we do everything conventional feed. We have them on pasture as much as we can, just because I like it. But on the other hand, you have to see, look at it at a cost basis. If you have a market that will support the cost of buying the organic or non-GMO feed and people want it, great. But otherwise, people really just like knowing their farmer.
Absolutely.
And I think there are things you can market about what you do that are maybe not organic, but like, we don't use any chemicals on our plants, but we're not organic. And sometimes that's enough to, oh, okay, that's really what they want to hear. So, I'm sure it's different for animals, but if there's some certain practices you follow that people would appreciate that aren't necessarily certified, but are sort of in the same light as what they might be, I think that helps too.
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Also, for a new producer, I knew it took me a little while to figure out, but sometimes, like I said, we do pigs, but a lot of times you can talk to, your feed mill or whatnot, and we usually use Southern States, but they do give a certain price break once you get over a certain number of bags of feed. Like at chicken feed, you get 10 bags, you get a little bit of a price break, and a little bit more, maybe 20. With pig feed, you get more with 20 and a little bit more with 40 bags, and you do a ton. So some of that comes down to storage issues, but that can be helpful too for a new grower to help your economies of scale.
Absolutely. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions or thoughts, I will close us out for the evening. And if anything comes up, really, anybody feel free to